For anybody who's been living under a rock, basically, Neil Young came out like a while ago. I feel like it was a while ago. Was it like last Friday or something like that? I remember talking about it over the weekend. Either way, it was a couple of days ago, and he was basically like, he wrote this like open letter to Spotify or some shit, was essentially said, either I go or Joe goes, and everybody knows what the fuck the calculation on that was immediately. Like, they just spent like fucking $100 million on Joe Rogan. Neil Young's not exactly the draw that he used to be. Like, dude's a legend, right? Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, great shit. Great shit. I'm not busting the guy's musical balls, but it's just, we knew regardless of what your opinion is on the situation, if you live in reality, you knew what Spotify was going to do. So my first reaction to this was like, Neil, this is kind of embarrassing. Like, not only do I as an individual not like really get on board with censorship, like, oh, I don't want to be I'm on YouTube. You know how many abhorrent fuckers are on YouTube? Like, some of the nastiest pieces of shit on earth are on YouTube making their living. So I mean, that would be the pot calling the kettle black, in my opinion, biting the hand that feeds, if you will. So all this kind of shit I think is bullshit. Plus, I think you should be able to say whatever the fuck you want as long as it's not like criminally liable in court. I don't have a problem with people saying dumb shit that's incorrect. People say incorrect shit not on accident all the time. So really hard, it gets messy trying to distinguish all of that kind of stuff. But they finally did remove Neil Young's catalog from Spotify. And as a result, it seems to have triggered that kind of like a snowball effect. Gavin, you and I were talking about that the other day. He seemingly wanted this to lead to bigger, more like popular artists to remove their fucking catalogs. It didn't really until he just got kicked off all alone, and it was like him and like Barry Manilow or some shit like that had their catalogs removed. But yeah, what was your initial take on all this?
Well, first of all, I just have to say shout out to Neil Young. The dude is a legend, and I particularly have a soft spot in my heart for him because I did grow up listening to a lot of his music. In particular, there was a song he recorded during the Bush years called "Let's Impeach the President" that my mom would play like over and over again during that time period. So if you want a good dose of like George Bush era leftism, go check out Neil Young's "Let's Impeach the President." It's a great protest song. Again, the guy's heart is in the right place. I think he really does care about this stuff, and he really thinks he's like, standing on a top a hill, crusading for his cause or whatever. I don't necessarily think he's like, a bad guy or whatever. That being said, yeah, I don't think this quite worked out for him the way he was hoping it would. I think he probably imagined a lot of other musicians, probably from the same generation or era, joining this cause, and him and fill in the blank with all these other musicians. They all join together, and they're also going to pull their music if Spotify doesn't do something about this disinformation problem. Unfortunately, no one seemed to join him at all in his endeavor. And yeah, Spotify obviously chose Joe Rogan over Neil Young. They just shelled out literally hundreds of millions of dollars to get Joe Rogan on their platform exclusively. And they're not just going to throw that away because Neil Young isn't happy with it. So again, I'm not really sure what Neil Young thought was going to happen, if he was just taking the stand out of principle, or if he really thought this was going to have an effect on Spotify's decision making. But again, yeah, as predicted, obviously they just removed him instead of Joe Rogan. We all knew this was coming. Joe Rogan's a huge podcast right now, and Spotify really has no choice but to stick to it because, again, they paid all that money. Despite the fact that I think Neil Young's heart is in the right place here, and I still think he's a cool guy, I do have to say, yeah, is censorship really the cause you want to like stake your career on and your music on? Because I get it. You hear about all these healthcare professionals that are stressed out and the beds are filling up and all this stuff. And, people are dropping dead from COVID, and it feels like an emergency situation, a crisis, which it is. That being said, I don't necessarily think it's grave enough to sacrifice our freedom of speech rights to just so willy-nilly kind of throw in the trash our ability to express ourselves, even if it's unpopular, even if our conclusions don't come to the same conclusion that the mainstream media has. And I'm not someone that thinks Joe Rogan has necessarily gone in a particularly impressive direction myself. I don't really listen to Joe Rogan anymore. About a year or so ago I did, and now I don't. I think frankly he is really taken a turn towards the right, not just on vaccine stuff, but just as far as the guests he has on in general. Recently he had on some like ex-CIA loser to talk about why we should have stayed in Afghanistan, stuff like that. It's not just the vax stuff. It's not just the vax content that I think is an indicator of where he's trending, and of the fact that he's kind of discovered this new far right audience. Even, in fact, I think this is interesting because, it makes me feel more sane. If you go to the Joe Rogan subreddit, actually, surprisingly enough, the Joe Rogan subreddit is full of people exactly like me, exactly like Zach, people that used to like Joe Rogan maybe a year or two ago, or further beyond that, and then now are pointing out the way that his content has changed, pointing out how the conversations on his show has changed and how his talking points have shifted further to the right. This is something that's being recognized by a lot of old school Joe Rogan followers, that he's kind of adopted this more like reactionary right wing, tendency on his show, and with the guests he has on. I'm sure you guys saw all the clips of the Jordan Peterson interview from the other day. Total cringe. A lot of us more old school Joe Rogan fans are a little bit disappointed with his turn in politics. I'm not defending his new viewpoints. That being said, it's his right to have those viewpoints. It's his right to shift to a more conservative perspective. He has the free speech right to do that. And again, Spotify, picked him up. They came to him with this offer and said, "Do you want to do your show here?" And he said, "Yes." Again, that's his right to do. And it does kind of blow my mind that in today's day and age, so much of the left is just so eager to abandon, the internet as the last bastion of free speech, which it is.
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of agree with the pushback from people that, agree more with Neil Young and saying that, hey, this isn't technically censorship. It's not like the government is preventing, Joe Rogan from being on a platform. It's not like Spotify is preventing him from being on a platform. Like Neil Young, yes, he does have every right to, be like, if this is the kind of platform you have, I don't want to be on it. Like 100%, he has that right. 100%. But everybody else has the right to just like look around and listen to the cricket noises when he does that, because you're like, well, I don't think this is really going to solve anything. Neil Young moving off of Spotify, if that's like his conviction and that's what his heart tells him, good for him. Fucking, that's fine, and we'll get to that, an extension of that argument when we talk about Fantano, right? Everybody has the right to spend their money how the fuck they want. You think Amazon's a horseshit, terrible company? It fucking is. Don't spend your money there. You won't hear me fucking telling you that that's a bad idea, but it's also, probably not going to put Amazon out of business, right? Because of all these other economic factors that we'd have to, organize to solve. So I just think that really what it is it's definitely an attempt to censor Joe Rogan. Like, you can't not call it that. But you're also correct in saying that it's not necessarily like a big tech effort. This was like an old rock effort, right? And Gavin's 100% when he said that, like, he needed somebody like Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan and, all these other like legendary, like Bruce Springsteen. He would have needed like 25 guys like that to come out and be like, we're all taking, like, every classic rock song is getting removed from Spotify or Joe Rogan. And that's like kind of like bullshit ultimatums. Like, I don't know. Do I want to live in a world where everything has to be sanitized, where like, you're a bad person if you just let other people fucking say whatever the fuck they want, and you'd be like, well, it's hurting people, and it's like, yes, but a lot of things that people say hurt people. It's like, where do we draw the fucking line there? Like, if I'm outside selling fucking cheeseburgers, like, that's hurting people. Like, you know what I mean? I don't fucking know.
But yeah, let's move on to the Fantano portion, because, Anthony Fantano, if you guys aren't familiar, has a channel on YouTube called TheNeedleDrop. And he's basically one of, if not the most important and influential music critics in the internet age. If you're not someone that pays a lot of attention to YouTube, then you might not even know that. But yeah, Anthony Fantano is probably the most relevant music critic, at least in America, in the digital age.
Oh, it's not even close.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask most people to name a single music critic, like music critics they know, a lot of people would probably only be able to tell you Anthony Fantano as a name. Like, people sometimes pay attention to Pitchfork, for example, their reviews, but I couldn't even tell you anyone that actually writes for Pitchfork. I just know of the umbrella, website. Fantano is in and of himself a brand and a figure. And for that reason, I do think what he has to say on this is, not unimportant. So let's take a listen or take a look here. He says, had to say hashtag bye bye Spotify and post this screenshot saying you've canceled Spotify Premium. So there's that. Your subscription will end on 2/3/22. He says, I've already got an Apple Music account, but kept this one around for NMF streams and easy access to independent artist submissions. But the company's bullshit is just too much to bear now. If you ever want to pitch me shit, just use literally any other platform. There's so many. And then he says, I'm not urging anyone to copy me or do shit like that. And I don't look down on anyone who does differently than me. After all, I understand Spotify offers their service a free version of the service, and that conversation or that convenience is going to draw a lot of people naturally. But I still don't think Spotify deserves my or your money for a premium service that doesn't even live up to the word premium. I'll also be moving my top singles of the year playlist over to somewhere else too, maybe YouTube. We'll see. And again, I like Anthony Fantano quite a lot. I've over the years, consumed quite a bit of his content. I really respect him as a music critic, etc. But I do think what he says here at the end is a little bit weird because he says maybe YouTube, and as we just pointed out, Zach, there's plenty of misinformation on YouTube, right? Like that's where Joe Rogan really blew up in the first place was YouTube. It's only after Spotify poached him did he take his exclusive content from YouTube and move it to Spotify. So, you can really blame YouTube for growing Joe Rogan's popularity in the first place. So while I understand the, want to stand up to a corporation like Spotify for what he sees as, profiting off of the spread of misinformation, what I don't really understand quite as much is like, well, I'll move it to YouTube. I mean, if you want to make that argument, then you could make that argument for YouTube too. But if you ask me, I wouldn't make that argument for either platform because I actually like to have choices when I go to these platforms. I like to be able to make my own decision as a, content consumer. And I don't want Spotify or YouTube as a platform, cleansing their platforms of any voices that they deem to be dangerous or that they deem to be unfit for my ears. Personally, I think I can make that choice myself. And again, even though I'm pro-vaccine, there are other topics such as foreign policy, lots of things that we talk about on this show where we don't reach the same conclusion as the mainstream media. Our conclusion is very different from the conclusion of the mainstream, establishment consensus. In this case, I do happen to agree with, the scientific community when it comes to vaccines. But again, there's lots of issues where that's not necessarily the case. And I want to feel free as a content creator myself to express myself, even if it might be out of the realm of acceptable thought or opinion or whatever. So this is definitely a complex and nuanced, question. And obviously, I think Fantano and Neil Young are well within their rights to, boycott this platform. Again, I just don't really see how like YouTube's any different. And even if you think it is, I certainly don't want that ideology to be brought over to YouTube where, they should censor people. They already are censoring people. Obviously, everyone's being censored in today's day and age, at least independent content creators. But it's just a very nuanced question. What's your thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, I think it's fair to kind of backtrack all of this a little bit because Anthony Fantano, I think, has just kind of reached his final straw with Spotify. I don't think if he hadn't been like crusading against them for quite a long period of time, that this might probably have gone unnoticed, that this might not have been the hill that he would have died on. And so I just pulled a couple of things that we can share really quickly to kind of give everybody an idea of how long homie's been going after Spotify and for a host of different reasons. And, we don't have to really play the clip, but if he said this is the worst thing that Spotify has ever done. And it's Anthony Fantano, who honestly gives a really anti-capitalist takedown of David X, who's the guy that is like the primary shareholder of Spotify, right? I think he's the CEO too. But he invested in what is called the defensive tech. That means they're going to go, use military weapons to profiteer and kill a bunch of people overseas. That's what he was using his money that he was basically exploiting artists to bring in that revenue. So obviously, Anthony Fantano was extremely pissed about this. This is from in December. And then I had one more that I wanted to pull up as well, where he was roasting Spotify just a few weeks ago as well. Again, kind of I feel like it's just fair to point out for him, this was like a final straw kind of a situation. So here he's talking about how after people were looking for more transparency on how much people were getting paid and how you could expect to make a living as like a small time, musician and things like that. He was roasting them for basically just saying that they put up like a glorified Q&A page, completely disrespecting the artist, completely, exploitative and all that kind of shit. So before I dive into my criticism of Anthony Fantano, I do want to give the dude his due. He has been making content for a long time, criticizing Spotify's treatment of artists, criticizing the way that they promote, all their different shit, how much money they keep for themselves as profit and not reinvesting in the new up and coming talent and giving them the ability to record and do all of those things. So I just wanted to preface this with all of that. Like, I also really like Anthony Fantano. I think he's the only relevant music critic. I've grown up listening to his fucking needle drop reviews like you, Gavin. So I really like the guy. I would love to talk to him someday if it ever works out. But yeah, this just seems like there's so many holes in this kind of an argument. Like, I get it, bro. Like, in the same way you're not telling anybody to follow you. I'm like, this is your money. Do what you want with it. But working that out rationally in my brain, I'm like, have you ever been on YouTube, bro? Like it gets way worse than even Steven Crowder. Like, Steven Crowder is not the worst guy on YouTube, and that's saying something because that dude pisses me off every time I watch one of his videos. I'll get like actually triggered, and that's just the beginning, right? So many nasty, hateful people that are talking all kinds of shit about what they don't know about, and they have been forever. And Anthony's been on YouTube since the dark ages, right? I remember when Nardwuar interviewed him in like 2011. Okay, so he looked totally different, right? And he's been on there on the internet a long time, like a mainstay. He knows how the fucking game works on here. There's all like, it's the muck. It is the, internet's fucking garbage can essentially, right? But there's treasure in garbage diving. And he was one of those treasures. I think it's undeniable, but he's never like threatened to leave YouTube because some like white supremacist guy blew up on his account, or like, oh, Charlie Kirk went too far. It's either me or Charlie Kirk. You know what I mean? Like, he has a lot of clout on YouTube. He's one of the big OG YouTubers. He's been invited on like YouTube retreats. Like, I've seen him do all kinds of like interviews about like crazy shit that he's done with YouTube.
For sure. And yeah, it is very true that Spotify as a company is certainly worth boycotting for other reasons too. As Ron Placone points out here, I don't agree with Neil Young's reasoning, but it'd be awesome if more artists at his level pulled their music from Spotify until they pay artists at least a penny per stream, which is so true because, as another user points out, Spotify pays artists between 1/3 and 1/2 of a cent per play, lower than Apple and YouTube. Spotify's CEO publicly blames artists' inability to earn enough income to survive on their unwillingness to change their music to conform to his ideas, which is true. I've read that quote. So yeah, Spotify's a terrible company. You have to get your song played like over 250 times to make a single dollar from it, which is incredibly exploitative towards the artist. The only streaming service which is worse in this regard actually is Amazon Music, which is no surprise. So yeah, not trying to defend Spotify here. It's a terrible company. Even though I am a premium listener myself, cards on the table, it wouldn't make me sad to see them suffer financially. They're a terrible exploitative company that's really shitty to the artists in particular, regardless of what you think about Joe Rogan. So, this is definitely an interesting conversation.